life gets busy and stresses everyone out. You might like people, but maybe you want to get away from them for just a little while. Lucky for you, northern Indiana has just the thing. Quiet places that not everyone knows about and are not heavily trafficked. A really nice getaway for your brain. Many of these used to be on Indiana maps and travel guides, but are no longer there. But they're still waiting as a hidden gem. Even the roads between these places are calming for the mind, making it a completely worthwhile journey. These places are perfect for when you just want to disappear. Go someplace that is not rushed or busy. Places where it might be just you and no one else. Great for kids that are overstimulated by noisy places. And in the process, you might even learn some interesting and unusual history. Come along for a road trip as we visit forgotten, quiet places in northern Indiana. Starting at the top of Indiana, we find Woods Mill, just along the road at Maryville. It was built by John Wood around 1838, who settled here with his wife and children. Unlike most grist mills, this one is made of brick. It was so well made that it operated for nearly 100 years, closing down in the 1930s. I've been here twice and have found it deserted both times. In the spring, you'll find many beautiful flowers. There's a quiet gazebo that looks like something from a dream. This is a great place to sit and de-stress, no time limits. At the very top of Indiana is a huge beach that borders Lake Michigan. It's so large that you'd think you were in Florida or California overlooking the ocean. But not everywhere is equally quiet. If you can get parking at Beverly Shores, the area is wonderful. Don't miss the historic homes that line the beach. Indiana Dunes is now a national park. There is a gate charge, but everything else is free. From May through August, this area can be very busy, particularly on the weekends. But outside of that, you might have it mostly to yourself. There's a long trail with wooden boardwalks and legends of Diana of the Dunes, the spirit of a woman that loved the area so much that she simply never left. Not far away and completely free is Mount Baldy. When I was a kid, Dad drove us here, all the way from Greenwood, Indiana. At the time, you were allowed to climb this sand dune, which was much taller than it is today. I climbed all the way to the top and slid down. result, sand in places I never thought possible. That was a very long ride home. And here's a fun fact. In 2013, a 6-year-old boy climbed Mount Baldy and fell into a sinkhole. He was immediately covered by 11 feet of sand. Fortunately, he was reached by heavy equipment, making a full recovery. Climbing Mount Baldy is now off limits, but there is a trail that leads to the beach. Driving to Marshall County, southwest of Plymouth, is the Chief Monomane Monument. I'd seen it on old maps for decades and finally made the pilgrimage. Born around 1791, Monomane was a Potawatomi chief that lived in this area. Well thought of as a leader, he embraced Roman Catholic religion and merged it with tribal beliefs. In 1836, his signature was forged on documents, giving away this land to the United States. Despite his protest, white settlers began building on Potawatomi tribal lands. Soon after, settler huts were burned, and in retaliation, Potawatomi cabins. The military was sent to protect settlers, and in 1838, the Potawatomi were forced to leave Indiana. Around 860 Potawatomi people traveled 660 miles to Kansas. Along the way, over 40 died. Many of them were elderly or children. Sadly, a few years after arriving at Kansas, Chief Monomane died, but his memory was not forgotten. In 1909, this became the first Native American monument in the United States, built by a state or federal enactment. Over at South Bend on the Notre Dame campus is the Grotto of Our Lady of Lourdes. Built in 1896, it's a 1/7 size replica of the one in France. Countless students have came here to pray about exams and important finals. Many have even came here and proposed marriage, finding it a serene and special place for the occasion. Every day at 6:45 p.m., rain or shine, the rosary is prayed. If you visit, be mindful of people praying here throughout the day. One of the most beautiful mills in Indiana can be found at Elkhart. Bonneville Mills was built in 1832 and still stands about 190 years later. During the regular season, you can take a peek inside, starting at the basement. There are 3 levels above. And if your knees can handle it, it's a time capsule of 1800s era technology. Get your picture as an Amish guy. Level 2, coming right up. At level 3, you're appreciating the finer things in life, like elevators. Simply a beautiful, quiet place. Also at Elkhart is the National New York Central Railroad Museum. Not well known outside the area, I toured the entire thing without seeing a single person. Directly to your left is a dining car used for special events. This is really two museums in one. Let's start with the indoor exhibits. Lots of railroad memorabilia. I won't pretend to know what most of these things are, but I'll hit the highlights. Check this out. A train made completely out of matchsticks. There's a lot here. If you stop to read everything, you could be here a long time. There's a play area for the kids. Now, if you don't step inside to take a look, we'll have to revoke your big kid card. Traveling with kids that need to burn off extra energy, you are in luck. But my favorite part is the model train exhibit. Can you imagine the time and patience it took to build all this? Lots and lots to see here. Walking out the door near the model trains puts you at a train depot platform. Here you'll find many old trains. And some of them are absolutely humongous. Lots of cool trains, lots of cool memorabilia, and some walking as a bonus. One place I'd seen on the map for many years was the home of Gene Straton Porter at Rome City. Born in 1863, she became a multimillionaire as a novelist and Hollywood producer. She and her husband are buried here among the many acres of peaceful trails. But it didn't start that way. Jean was killed in 1924 when her vehicle was struck by a streetcar in California. Her husband Charles put her in the famous Hollywood Forever Cemetery with plans of moving her back to Indiana. After all, they were both Hoosiers and loved this place along the lake. But he died just 2 years later, before he could make it happen. It took about 60 years and many legal battles before their grandkids could bring them home, a place they always wanted to be. Operated by the Indiana State Museum, there is a charge to tour the home, but walking the grounds is completely free. I can imagine Jean sitting here of a morning, sipping on her cup of tea, looking across the water and marveling at the beautiful vista. As she was the 12th child of a minister, there were likely many hand-me-downs. But as a millionaire, everything was different, wonderfully different. While most of us dream about that big break, a dream job, or winning the lottery, Jean created this world one sentence at a time, writing about nature and her life in Indiana. And it paid off big time. This is one of those places where the rest of the world doesn't exist. I didn't have high expectations, but having made a visit, I was impressed by how my mind calmed down. A gentle breeze, tree branches and leaves floating on air, and a port that fills the mind with many journeys. I imagined that Jean felt a similar drawing, a path taken by those that dream, write, and dream again. Beside the house is a garden. In the 17th century, the kings of Europe commissioned lavish gardens. They were places to walk, de-stress, and look for solutions. In their design were pathways to contemplation, such as this tunnel of vines. Symbolic of life's journey, there's a beginning and an end. In the middle are choices, steps that take us down the line, for better or for worse. We can blame the whole world for all our problems, but in the end, it's up to us to steer the ship. And yet, whatever we choose, the ending never changes. It begs the question, what seeds are you planting, and what do you hope to grow? Most of us won't be millionaires, award-winning novelists, or Hollywood producers, but we can come here and dream for just a little while. Heading down to Fort Wayne is an old Indiana monument that used to be on all the state maps. This is the grave of John Chapman, otherwise known as Johnny Appleseed. Born in 1774, he planted apple seeds from Pennsylvania all the way over to Illinois, as well as West Virginia and even Ontario, Canada. He wore a cooking pot on his head wherever he went. He was an unusual character, deeply religious, with his own Christian beliefs. Even in his own lifetime, he was a legend. Despite his eccentric behavior, he became very successful, owning over 1,200 acres of nurseries. His orchard in Allen County alone had 15,000 apple trees. He was also known for being very generous and helping others in need. We certainly need more people like that. Continuing down the road to Huntington, we find Memorial Park. There are a few steps down, but if you can do them, this place is extraordinary. This was once a quarry that's been transformed into paradise. And depending on when you visit, you might get the entire place to yourself. Just west of town is the Forks of the Wabash. This was the homestead of Jean-Baptiste Richardville, chief of the Miami Indians. Born around 1761, he was a brilliant negotiator. He made a great deal of money in both land sales and selling supplies to settlers. You can tour his home. And buildings in the village. Or walk along the Wabash. Also on my map for years was the Limberlost Cabin at Geneva. The site is also operated by the Indiana State Museum, and there's a charge to tour the home. Completed in 1895, it was the first home built by novelist and Hollywood producer Gene Straton Porter. Built out of quality materials, it looks like a lodge from the Northwest, fit for a millionaire. It got its unusual name from the nearby Limberlost swamp that Gene liked to explore. But wait, we're not done. The swamp got its name from a man known as Limber Jim. He got lost in the swamp. People in town asked each other where he was, to which people said, "Limber's lost." One of my favorite finds when traveling are museums that almost no one knows about, and the town of Wabash has one of those. The Wabash County Museum has several floors of modern exhibits. It was a complete surprise when I drove by. I'd never even heard of it. It has a theater, prehistoric artifacts, good coverage of pioneer life, and many fun interactive exhibits. This one has a motion sensor. As soon as you get close, it triggers the sound of rattlesnakes in a bag. They've done a great job of preserving local history. I'm always drawn to model trains. It even has a great play place for the kids. To be clear, there is a lot to take in. I always stop at old mills. Once very common, there's very few left in Indiana. The Stockdale Mill in Wabash County was completed in 1857. Before electricity, these water-powered mills were how things got done. And as they needed water to provide power, they're always beside peaceful places. Just down the road is the ruined covered bridge. Built in 1877, it's 288 feet long. I have no idea why, but if a covered bridge is still open for traffic, I will drive through it every single time. These were built to trick horses into thinking they were walking into a barn. The roof also preserved the floor, protecting it from rain, snow, and ice. And though they weren't built for cars, they were tough enough to take them too. Driving through a covered bridge is like time travel. On the western edge of Wabash is one of the older state memorials. Though I'd seen it on maps for decades, I didn't know the very strange story behind it. And believe me, it is a doozy. Born in 1733, Frances was kidnapped by Delaware Indians while living in Pennsylvania. She was taken from her Quaker family and disappeared into uncharted wilderness, never to see her parents again. She was only 5 years old and raised among the tribe as a daughter, learning their language and ways. She took the Indian name Makanaqua and eventually married a warrior. He later became a Miami chief. In 1837, when she was 64 years old, her biological sister and two brothers visited from Pennsylvania. In the back of their mind, they probably thought she'd come back with them. But after 60 years, she had forgotten how to speak English and remembered very little of her life before being kidnapped. Her sister and two brothers were complete strangers. She made it clear this was her home, and she didn't want to leave. Traveling west to Peru is the Seven Pillars Nature Preserve. Looking like an ancient abandoned temple, the Mississippi River flows beside it. Outside the tourist season and during the week, it's not busy. Not so much during the summer and on weekends. Also along the river is the International Circus Museum. This used to be the winter headquarters for the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus. As it's out in the country, this one doesn't get much traffic. When I was there, it was just me and two other people. This is a pretty incredible miniature. How the circus was about 100 years ago. For advertising when a circus came to town, there would be a parade with colorful wagons and music. Music came from a loud calliope, making it impossible to ignore. Adding to the excitement were colorful costumes with sequins that sparkled under the light. This glamour and excitement are why kids wanted to run away and join the circus. There is memorabilia galore. One of the last museums of its kind. This place is a time capsule, preserving an era that no longer exists. Heading into downtown Peru is the Miami County Museum. This is another one of those older county museums that's not well known and never busy. If it's like the day I visited, it could be just you and the person at the desk. The first floor pays tribute to Peru native Cole Porter. He famously wrote the song Anything Goes. Many decades later, it was used in the movie Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. They even have his car. I was very impressed with the Native American artifacts and the prehistoric collection. This is a huge number of points. One room is dedicated to antique firearms. Exiting on the second floor, you'll find a complete city. A horse in a top hat. Why not? This is like walking through a ghost town, a different time and different place, with treasures left by people long gone. School is in session, and you better not be mouthy. She looks like she's ready for your type. Church is ready for morning service, and you're the first to get here. The hotel has a dinner table ready for patrons. And a dentist chair sits waiting to fill your cavities with lead. A doctor's office is always open. And if your buggy needs fixed, you know where to go. There's a beauty shop if you want that perm. That is, if you're brave enough. Everything is frozen in the past, and you are the only one left. And on the third floor, some of the most interesting artifacts in Indiana. For example, the coveralls owned by Robert Wadlow, the world's tallest man. At 8 feet 11 inches, he was the tallest documented man in history. Yes, I said documented. That's an entirely different video. Lots and lots of circus memorabilia. including the skull of an elephant. Having went berserk and killed its owner, it too was killed. The skull is here as a warning to other homicidal elephants that crime doesn't pay. And that kind of stuff is why I love old museums. Near Cutler, Indiana is the Adams Cover Bridge that crosses Wildcat Creek. Built in 1872, it's the only way to Adams Mill from the northwest. Completed in 1846, Adams Mill is pretty substantial, 3.5 stories tall. It operated for 106 years, closing in 1952. I guess you'd call that built to last. Heading northwest to Delphi is Canal Park. It has not only a peaceful village, but also a canal boat for graceful tours during the summer. This is the only canal boat ride in Indiana since Metamora's boat was destroyed. It takes you through a reconstructed section of the Wabash-Erie Canal. Back in the day, this was going to be the secret of Indiana's success, bringing in products from abroad, but also exporting items from Indiana's heartland. However, it was obsolete before it was even finished, as the railroads were much more cost-effective. That and muskrats put holes in the sides of these canals, draining all the water. There is also a museum. And a playground boat for the kids. You might have heard of the Monon Railroad, but there is actually a Monon, Indiana that has a train museum. When you arrive at the Monon Connection parking lot, you'll see trains and train memorabilia. Inside is both the Whistle Stop restaurant and a wonderful museum. This is beautifully done, and if you love trains, you'll love the collection. They've put a lot of work in this one, and it absolutely shows. At Battleground Indiana is the Tippecanoe Battlefield Memorial. It's an impressively large monument memorializing the Battle of Tippecanoe. In 1811, this is where Indiana Territory Governor William Henry Harrison fought Chief Tecumseh's alliance. It was a solid victory for the military, as Tecumseh himself and many of the alliance weren't even there. It was made worse by Tecumseh's brother, Tenskwatawa. He told warriors that they had magical powers and bullets wouldn't hurt them. To say the least, no one trusted his magic after that. On property is a museum. It tells not only about the Battle of Tippecanoe, but local history with many great displays. There's an exhibit of fine-grade antique rifles. This is an officer's sword. A compass to provide valuable guidance on the frontier. A bow and arrows. Also included are prehistoric artifacts, all of which are over 1,000 years old. From a grinding stone and points, to ancient pottery shards and stone axes. I was the only one at the museum, beside the person at the front desk. Rounding off the trip is Williamsport Falls at Williamsport. At 90 feet tall, it's officially the tallest publicly accessible waterfall in Indiana. There are 2 observation decks. The one closer to the parking lot is a very short walk. Both views are very impressive. A little piece is accessible for everyone. These were just a sample of forgotten quiet places in northern Indiana. Beloved by people that know them, undiscovered treasures to others. Every trip across northern Indiana, I find more and more reasons to keep coming back. Places that feel timeless, unrushed, and inviting. If you're ready for a rest in forgotten quiet places, maybe it's time for a road trip.